Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing bail reform in Canada. We've just had a discussion about how bail works now and some amendments to bail that were made in 2019. But now Canadian premiers have called for the federal government to make bail more difficult to achieve, to be granted, particularly for people who have committed firearms offenses, violent offenses. All premiers have asked for changes for firearms offenses. They have asked for something called a reverse onus for bail. Carolyn, can you explain what a reverse onus for bail would mean and what your views on that are?
So for sure, a reverse onus means that individuals seeking bail would have to show why they should be released, as opposed to the Crown demonstrating why an individual should be detained. So it essentially makes it more difficult. There's more of an uphill battle to demonstrating why you should be released on bail. In terms of what I think this means, and whether ultimately it keeps the Canadians safer, I'm not sure that it does. There's a lot of evidence, I would suggest, that says the law on bail as it is already provides the framework for justices to detain accused who they feel pose a risk to the public or who may not reappear for the next court date. So I'm not at all convinced that this is ultimately a reform that's going to lead to greater safety, which is what the intention is. I do think that there's reason to believe that it will make it more difficult for groups who are already having a hard time achieving bail. So, for example, people who can't afford a private lawyer, I think it's for sure going to make it more difficult for them to get out. But I'm not sure ultimately that it's a change that is needed or that will achieve the long-term desired outcome of enhanced public safety.
So, Ari, I already know that a reverse onus would make your job, make you work harder, would make your job a little more difficult. What is your view on a reverse onus system? And keep in mind, every premier has asked for this. And some premiers, for example, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, have asked for a reverse onus, not just for firearms offenses, but for violent offenses involving knives and bear spray. So what's your view on that, Ari?
So here's the secret sauce. The reverse onus term is a misnomer. It's a bit of a legal fiction. The justice of the peace, who probably never experiences the violence, the judge who probably goes back to a leafy gated community, doesn't have to deal what so many people in these overrepresented, a term, by the way, I completely reject, but if you accept it, who are the victims, or who do the victims tend to be of these two overrepresented groups? They're the victims in those very communities. Justices of the peace, that's a term, and judges tend to not go home to that. So you can't have a conversation about bail reform without asking yourself, why are judges and justices of the peace so happy to release somebody?
Ari, not to interrupt, but the example you gave in our first segment of Miles Sanderson, he victimized his own community, his own family, in a terrible fashion. Is a brutal multi-homicide committed by a repeat violent offender who was out on bail.
You should interrupt. It is your show, and that's an important reason why you say Miles Sanderson, because he wasn't terrorizing the streets of the Bridle Path or Shaughnessy or Granville Island. He was terrorizing his own Cree Nation. So everybody who makes a very good living, and look, I'm part of that, full disclosure, basically saying there's too many people in jail, there's too many people from this background or that background. There's a financial interest in it. You're asking me a question about what keeps the community safer. First stop is that the Lametti and Trudeau government are useless on this issue. The reverse onus part is a waste of time. It's already there for most firearms offenses. That's why I look at this, I'm like, these people are dodo birds. Number two, and this is important, and it's really timely to our conversation, Christine, is that the Ford government in Ontario came out just the other day with a significant money behind it bail package that's addressing many of the things that I'm talking about. Now, I'm no friend of the Ford government. Somebody can probably Google that. But if you really do want to talk about public safety, that one premier is actually doing something to put resources and boots on the ground to prevent the kind of offending from a very small subset of people, Christine. This is not 90% of people on bail, or 60, or 30, or 20. It's probably, and I'm just making this up, but it's probably 2 to 5% of offenders that are wreaking the havoc that we are.
Right.
So until there can be an honest discussion
Ari,
about this,
Ari,
there'll be no
we've got to go to break, but we'll be right back.